Hello, everyone. My name is Maite Mateo, and I am the secretary of ARCOBE. I'm glad to present the first interview of this special event with Maria Eugenia from Objetos con Vidrio, Argentina, for the International Year of Class 2022. In this opportunity, we have the honor to talk with the artist and glazer Judith Schaechter. Welcome, Judith and Maria Eugenia. How are you doing today? Are you feeling?
Hello.
I'm good. How are you?
I am very happy to have you here, Judith, and thank you very much for this amazing opportunity. It's great to have you here and to come talk to you. And how are you doing, Maria Eugenia, today?
Very well. Thank you very much for this meeting. I appreciate it.
So actually, Judith has numerous important art stained glass pieces in different museums and galleries from all around the world. Judith has also taught workshops at numerous institutions, including the Pilchak Glass School in Seattle, the Penland School of Crafts in Toyama Institute of Glass, and Australia Nation University in Canberra, Australia. So today for us is an honor to have Judith share with us this amazing interview, and we hope you also have a great time and learn a lot. So when you are ready, I can share the screen and start with the presentation, Judith.
Okay. Ready.
Wonderful, so here we go. Okay, so now it's sharing, right? You can see it in big size?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Amazing. So to start, Judith, we would like you to tell us where did you grow up and how is that you start to introduce yourself in the world of art or visual arts, or what were you interested in this field?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me today. I really do appreciate it, and thank you for anyone listening. I grew up in Newton, Massachusetts. Neither of my parents was from Massachusetts. My mother was from the middle of the United States, Oklahoma, and my father is from Europe. Specifically, he was born in Milan, Italy, and during World War II immigrated to Ecuador, South America. So he was a professor at Tufts University in Boston. And so that's where I grew up, but I never felt like I was really from there. I went to art school to become a painter, and I thought for sure that I was a painter. I was very lucky. My parents were very supportive and wanted to help me become an artist. And I had a lot of art before I went to art school, including going to Rhode Island School of Design. In high school, they have a pre-college program. And also Massachusetts College of Art had a Saturday school. So I thought for sure that I was a painter. But when I went to Rhode Island School of Design, I did study painting for about a year. And then I tried glass. I just saw what the class was doing. It was right near the painting room, and I was very excited by it. So I tried it, and I knew immediately that I wanted to do it forever. And so I dropped my painting major, and I remember the teacher saying, "How do you know? How can you know? You're too young to know." But I just knew, and now it's almost 40 years later, so I must have known. I don't know how, but I knew.
But for sure, you become in love with glass.
Very much in love with glass, yes, and very much not in love with painting. The photograph that we're looking at is in my studio, which is in my home in Philadelphia, where I have lived since 1983 and worked out of my home.
Amazing. And tell us a little bit about your first influences in the art field, mostly that we can see maybe also in your work. You mentioned a lot about the Gothic art or this kind of aesthetic that impression to you when you were a child. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I think my father being European was a very important influence in my life, because it's not necessarily true that an American family would be happy about their child being interested in art. My father took me to the Boston Museum of Fine Arts often when I was little. And this was a painting that I saw there. And I was terrified of this painting, but at the same time, I was very attracted to it. And I was like, looking at it and trying not to see it and see it at the same time. And I think that this was the beginning of understanding art as something that could be very powerful and something important. So in this way, this was a very important painting for me. Later on, my influences, I do love Gothic art very much, but I feel like I'm influenced by everything. And my teachers, my stained glass teachers, were very important to me. My main teacher was a woman from Stuttgart named Ursula Huth. It's spelled H-U-T-H. And she was a graduate student at Rhode Island School of Design. And she was my stained glass teacher. Her teacher in Stuttgart at the Stuttgart Academy had been a man named Hans Gottfried von Stockhausen. And he was a post-war artist who was the first to do autonomous panels, so stained glass outside of architecture. These are just some images that I've found on the internet that I think are really funny. I like medieval painting. I think we think of painting very seriously, but it's not always very serious.
So for you, you think that this thing about the painting, like the piece of art and this kind of glamorous place that the painting can have, sometimes you have to break a little bit that kind of meaning that the painting or the piece of art has?
Well, when I went to school to be a painter, I had taken a lot of art history classes, and I was very intimidated by how serious painting was. And I think I couldn't live up to that image of painting. I wanted to be an artist, but it was too much. It was too much pressure. Also, when I look at the way art history is taught or was taught when I was a student, it was just men. And I didn't think that there was a place for me in the history of painting because of all those men. So when I began in stained glass, I didn't know the history. It seemed like it didn't have a long history. There was the medieval period, and then in England anyway, there's the Protestant Reformation, which put the stained glass business out of business. So there was really nothing. And in the United States, there's nothing until Tiffany. It's a very empty history. So I felt like it was more possible to be part of that. These images that you're showing are images that I love because they are reflective of a vivid imagination. When I was in art school, painting was taught like there were two choices. You could be realistic or abstract. But what I always wanted to do was be realistic, but not work from life, work from my imagination, which seems like a third choice. And that there was no discussion of that in school. But I was finding, especially in the Gothic, a lot of work that was just straight from people's imaginations. At least I hope this is from their imagination.
So for what you mentioned, maybe the studies on United States, you see that it's kind of difficult to be in an art school, putting your own ideas on, or let's say your own image on it. Is more about following an idea of what an artist is and what an artist should do in order to make a new painting or a piece of art. It was a little like that for you?
I don't think so. I think what happens is, for a while, the professor has the students painting from life, from still lives and from models. And then the professor said, okay, now it's your turn to make anything you want. And that was great. That was a lot of freedom. And I was excited, but I didn't know what I wanted. So it was, and neither did any of the other students. So it was a crisis. And in order to find out what it was that I liked, I could look at artwork that I liked and try to make artwork like that. And these are some great examples. Or I could try to find inside myself what it was that I wanted to say. And ultimately, I wanted to work from my imagination, like I said, but I didn't really know what my imagination was. It's easy to say that. I taught a class for a while where I was working with students to work from their imagination. And the thing they do first is use someone else's imagination. There was a lot of cartoons that look like things you would see on the television, but it wasn't their own imagination, it was someone else's. It's very hard to find your own imagination. And I just have sometimes wondered why there isn't more support for that in art school, but I have tried to teach those classes myself. So.
That's amazing. So tell us a little bit about how this first, you said you know the class because of the art school. So you saw the material, you saw this class and you start to be in love, like right off straight away with glass. How were your first experience with glass, and how is that you start to work with flash glass? That is one of the most remarkable things in your work. And how was this process about develop this technique you use right now with such an amazing quality?
When I was a painting major and I saw the glass class that I later took, what they were doing was sandblasting flash glass. And does your audience know what flash glass is, or should I do a little explanation?
I think it's great if you can give an explanation also with your own words about what is it about. Yeah, that would be great.
Well, flash glass is a type of handmade glass, hand blown, that has a very thin veneer of very bright color fused to it when the glass is molten and being blown. And when I get the sheets, or when anyone gets the sheets, it's possible to carve into the color. I think it's probably easiest to think of it like a cameo, although it's not quite that thick. And what I like to do with the glass is, first of all, sandblast it and then do multiple carving processes into that layer to get the colors. So people think that my work is painted with a lot of enamels. The only color of enamel I use is black and silver stain, which is yellow. But mostly what I'm doing is carving into the flash glass. And I learned how to sandblast on the first day. And the process of working with the other tools, such as engraving tools, that came with a lot of time. I did see other people using flexible shaft engravers, which are tools that jewelers use to carve things. And I did get one early on. The tool that I'm using in this image is a very fancy, very expensive engraving tool that I would recommend for anyone who wants to do a lot of this. And I do so much of it that I sometimes for hours and hours every day. This is very good for your hand. The other one is more painful. And ultimately what I discovered was that I didn't need to plug the tools in, because the engraving surface is diamonds. And diamonds will scratch glass whether they have a motor attached or not. So I discovered these files. They're like a nail file, you know, nail file. But they have diamonds on them, and I can file into the flash glass. That's something that I discovered myself. And that's how I get the tones, the really smooth tones. As for the layering of the glass, because I don't just use one piece of flash glass, I use 2 or 3 and sometimes even 4 on top of each other. That's the file right there. The layering of the flash glass started because my light table was small and I had little piles of glass all over it to make room to work. And I would look at the piles of glass and think, wow, that's very exciting. I think I want to make a piece based on that. And one thing I will say is I think it's very hard for people to understand this technique when it's spoken about, even students who have experience with glass. It's much easier to do it when you have the ability to touch the glass and see it in person. So basically what I'm doing is I'm sandblasting and engraving flash glass and filing it. And then I paint on it and then I stack it up.
I think, yeah, what were you saying about talking about this is really hard, but it helps a lot when you are doing it in the moment and it's like, oh, wow, okay, now I get what is happening. Like the glass is such a special material that most people are not used to work with, maybe, that is full of surprise. I think a lot of people, when they see your work, or at least for me, what happens at the beginning was like, but how she does it? How is this working? It's really, yeah, that you cannot tell what's going on there until you see the process and it's like, ah, wow, now I understand. And I think it's very important, what are you saying about how you, when you see these glasses together on your table, like how for you was all the process from years and from, I imagine, a lot of samples and mistakes, that those mistakes finish on a new way to work or a new thing that you say, oh, okay, it doesn't work, but maybe this is better for this. It was all like maybe trying a lot of times.
Well, I didn't have an idea of what it should look like. So there wasn't a goal. I was just experimenting, and I still do. I don't try to know ahead of time what I want it to look like. Although having made a lot of these heads, I have some idea of what's going to happen. But basically, I'm not planning ahead. I do a lot of work on one piece of glass before bringing in another layer. I think my head would explode if I had to know all of that stuff ahead of time. I'm comfortable not knowing. And I'm not planning it. So part of it is improvising and spontaneous.
Exactly. Here, what are we seeing now in this picture is you have in your hands, if I see, okay, I think there are 3 layers that you use of different colors, and you already do all this treatment you were talking with us about the sandblast, the engraving and the painting, and basically this is how you are going there to the final result, combining the colors and these techniques that you were describing before, right?
That is exactly right, yes.
Wonderful.
And that's another example. So that is what the piece looks like when the 2 layers are separate. If one were to fold that up, you would see them, there you go, as one. And that's again working with the file. Oh, that's just funny. I had an injury. I don't really have a tattoo. That's a temporary tattoo. I would get that if my partner would be okay with me getting a tattoo, but he doesn't like the idea. So anyway, I had a wrist injury, and I thought I would heal myself by putting a tattoo of a glass cutter on it, so that I would, and it's my left hand, see, no tattoo, so that I would be able to cut glass again. And I did heal.
I was wondering if it was a tattoo or not.
It should be.
Yo quería preguntarle a Judith sobre las medidas de seguridad que toma cuando hace estos trabajos, ¿no? Tan cercanos de pulido, de grabado, por el tema de la respiración y las medidas de seguridad, si puede desarrollar un poco sobre eso.
Perfect. Okay, so what Maria Eugenia was asking is, once that you are done with your works, with your panels, what kind of security measures should you use in order to make this panel safe for where they have to be after you do all the work, or for exhibitions? How do you control that? If it's always the same technique, you use different methods. If you can tell us a little about that.
Well, I think of glass as being very strong. The pieces aren't particularly fragile when they're finished. They are exhibited in a Lightbox, but that is mainly because it's much more convenient to show them that way rather than to depend on wherever they're being exhibited to have the appropriate windows. So they're in a Lightbox for that reason, and they are packed in crates when they have to be shipped. Glass does break, but generally speaking, every stained glass window has little tiny breaks in it that aren't structural and don't harm the look of the piece at all. In fact, I think they add to the piece. If, say, something very central like a character's face had a big smash in it, I would have to remake it. But basically, the glass is pretty strong and the pieces are strong. So I don't worry about it too much.
So as you were saying, mostly all your stained glass work goes always on a Lightbox. So your panels are always think as art pieces, not mostly for an architectural space. They are more for exhibition or maybe for a private house or something like that. So once that this Lightbox is ready, you put the panel on the Lightbox, and then you put also some protective glass or something. You have to add, no, straight away the Lightbox and the panel.
Yes, and I would advise people don't attack it with a hammer or acetone. Just lightly dust it.
Basically advice, and everything should work.
Yes. This is a great picture that explains the 3 layers. So if you want me to talk about it just a little bit, I can do that. Do you want to go back to it? This is what it looks like together. And that's the part with the head. So the center is a piece of blue on clear flash glass that I have sandblasted and then engraved and then used that file. The black outline is vitreous paint that's fired on. And then when all of that was done, I moved on to the piece of red glass to the left and put that on top and started engraving it so I could see how it was interacting. And the third piece, the pink, doesn't have a lot done to it. And then the next slide is what they look like together. It's just the top section.
Yeah, exactly, the part of the head and the chest, but it's amazing how
amazing.
the difference when they are separated, how you can see the delicate work, and then together it's just, yeah, it's amazing. And for all this process you do in order to do these pieces for the engraving, you produce some glass pulver and some other things that are toxic, right? So what kind of measurements do you use during your work to protect yourself, or what is important to take care in that moment where you're doing your pieces?
I cross my fingers. I don't think that these processes are all that toxic. When engraving and filing and all of that, you use a lot of water. There is no dust because the dust is in the water, and I'm mopping it up with a towel, and it's important to wash the towels. And when the towel gets dry, you don't want to breathe the dust coming off the towel. And the painting, the paint is toxic, but you know, don't snort lines of it. It's not gonna fly into your bloodstream and kill you. I vent my kiln with a fan, and I get my toxicity, my heavy metal tox screen is what it's called in the United States, to test your blood for toxins from this kind of thing, and I'm fine. So you don't have to go crazy. You don't have to wear gloves and a respirator. I wear a respirator when I sandblast. That's important.
Exactly. Perfect. So now we start a little bit with some of your work from the beginning, okay, chronologically, to see a little of the important pieces. And what we would like for you to say is maybe a little the story of these pieces, how the design, how you develop the design, or maybe if they have a special meaning for you, or how do you work with what maybe you were saying at the beginning about how you work with your imagination in order to become true these things that are going on your head on the glass.
Well, 2009 is hardly the beginning, but this is an older piece, considering that it is now 2021. This piece was inspired by the glass itself. A lot of the pieces are inspired by things that I want to try with the glass. So I took a large, and by large I mean maybe 12 by 16 inch piece of red glass, and I made a picture of a nude man. And then I took a picture of a piece of blue glass, and I made an image of a woman. The woman is very clear in this image. When you see the piece in person, the man is also pretty clear, but he doesn't show up as well in reproductions. And I just wanted to see what they would look like on top of each other. There are something like 16 possible directions, like they can be facing each other and both with their heads up, or one with a head up and a head down, and then you can turn the glass like that. There's a number of ways, combinations that one can try. My lover, my partner, lives in England, so we are not together. So this was a way of conjuring him up in my imagination and having us be united, even though neither of us look like these people. And the trees are actually very three-dimensional. There are 3 layers of glass. And so 3 layers of glass have 6 surfaces that can be visible because it's transparent. So some of the image is on the very top and some is on the very bottom. And so it has a lot of depth to it. So those are some of the ideas behind this piece.
Great. But so you were able to put all of your imagination on the pieces. You were, maybe you were not sure at the beginning, but I think you do a very good job.
Well, I had to teach myself. It didn't just happen overnight. Sin eaters are a concept that I heard about from Ireland. It is a tradition where when someone is dying, you bring a person over. This person is a sin eater, and perhaps they are, a homeless person. And you lay a loaf of bread on the chest of the dying person. And as they die, all the sins are absorbed into the bread. And then they give it to the sin eater and he eats it to get rid of all the sins. So I was originally also thinking about the myth of the Minotaur. So this man was supposed to be crawling out of a maze. And I couldn't, the maze was too hard to make in glass, so it's a spiral instead. And I wanted to have him walking out of it like he was leaving this sort of spiral of problems and beauty and going to a new place. I collect a lot of images, and I have a lot of images of men crawling. And this was another in the same period of time when I was thinking about the myth of the Minotaur. I didn't actually read the myth of the Minotaur. And if I had, I would have understood that he is the villain in the story. I thought he was the good guy. And I felt very sorry for the Minotaur being trapped in the maze. And I was also maybe trapped in an uncomfortable identity. So I was trying to create images surrounding that idea.
So for you, a big part of your work becomes also from kind of mythologic stories, or this kind of all stories that have some meaning, or because you have a lot, for what I see in your work is a lot of like narrative thing, right? Like you are telling something with each piece. It's a kind of a story behind always, and maybe you, apart from this Gothic aesthetic that we can see a lot on your work, on your characters, or the way you use the light, or I think also the clothes your characters use. You also like to kind of represent all these kind of stories or mythological things on your work?
Well, I would say my relationship to narrative is loose and free. Like I said, I didn't even read the myth of the Minotaur, but I knew about it, sort of. What I'm interested in is making images that look like narratives that people can read their own story into. So I don't have a fixed story for these pieces. I could make one up, but when I'm thinking about making the piece, I'm thinking about what looks provocative, what looks like it would inspire a story in another person, not so much how can I tell a specific story. So they're open-ended as narratives, I hope. Maybe I don't always succeed. And I am inspired by other narratives, but only loosely, I would say. And this one was actually inspired by a piece of music. And the piece of music is called The Cold Song. And it's from an opera by Henry Purcell. I am not an opera fan. I have never been to the opera in my life, and I'm not trying to go anytime soon. But this song I heard on YouTube, sung by an artist who was a sort of post-punk singer from the 1980s, who shortly after doing this performance of the Cold Song died himself of AIDS. So he knew he was dying. I was really moved by this song, and I wanted to make an artwork about it. It was so sad to me about someone who is begging to freeze to death because they have never known the warmth of love in their life. And I was like, oh, that's terribly sad. And I wanted to make a piece about it. This piece was very hard for me to make, maybe because I had such specific ideas about it. And I actually ended up making the piece 4 times, and 2 of them I destroyed. And I finished 2 of them. One I sold as a study, and this one, which was the final version, which is at the Corning Museum of Glass. So it was also hard for me to finish the piece because I was so happy with the face of the person, and I couldn't make anything that was good enough. And it took a long time.
So for what you are saying, sometimes in the process, the creative or design process, you are very spontaneous. And as you were saying in the first picture, maybe you can turn around and have a go trying different positions. But in other cases like this, you have a very, very specific thing, and you just go to it and until you don't have exactly what you want. In this kind of cases, you don't improvise so much. You have a plan and you need to go there.
I ended up having to improvise because I tried 3 of my ideas and they didn't work. So finally, you know what happened was I was getting acupuncture. I love acupuncture. When I get acupuncture, I have beautiful hallucinations of what artworks I should make. And I just had some sort of a vision of this in my head, and then was able to understand how to make it. Well, this is a really unusual piece for me because almost always the characters are in an abstracted space. Even the last one isn't very convincing as a realistic forest. In this, I tried very hard to create an image of a real space, which it was sort of a personal experiment for me.
So in this case, we can see a little more of painting work that maybe like more with this black enamel you said you use is more working with that usually you do in your pieces.
Yes, well, I do a lot of work with black enamel, but this one has a lot, yes. Well, and then in 2012, I had an exhibition at the Eastern State Penitentiary historical site. And it's not an active prison. It's a tourist attraction in Philadelphia. And they have an active artist in residence plan. And I installed 17 pieces there. The penitentiary opened to the public in about 1990, I think. And the first time I saw it, I thought, oh, I desperately would like to put my artwork in there. So it fulfilled a lifelong dream to do that. Did you have a specific question about it?
Yeah, something that I think in this particular work you did is like here we see a lot of your panels on an architectonical side, which is not, as we were talking before, not so often. For you, your production is more on the Lightbox for exhibitions or private works, or the stained glass piece as an autonomous piece of art. But in this case, we see the stained glass on an architectonical context. So how was for you to work with the building and communicate it with the building and thinking how the panel will work with the building and with the space? How was all that process?
Well, it was terrifying because I'd never done it before. But like I said, I was very inspired by the space, and people have throughout my career given me a lot of criticism about the light boxes and about the use of artificial light. For me, it was always just a convenient solution. I do agree that it's not the nicest way to look at a stained glass window. But I also am kind of lazy. And like I said, when you exhibit in a gallery, they end up in these light boxes. So when people would say, where would you like to show them in architecture? It's the Eastern State Penitentiary was always my first and last answer. I've never been commissioned by a church. I have a feeling I never will be. I think they're too frightening for a church, although I would find a commission like that really interesting, and I would be interested in doing it. I'm interested in things about spirituality. Well, I'm not religious myself. The architecture of Eastern State Penitentiary, first of all, is the first prison in the world built on principles that come from the Enlightenment, where it used to be that people just went into a room and they would throw everyone in together and it would be chaos. So this was the first penitentiary, which was intended to be a place of penance, hence the word penitentiary. And the prisoners were all in solitary confinement, and each cell, which was very large by today's standards, although you wouldn't want to be stuck in one for very long, Each cell is built like a little chapel and has 2 windows placed just the way windows are placed in a church, so that the person is looking up at a radiant light source that beams down on them and is suggestive of spiritual light. And so it seemed really important to put stained glass in those cells. This particular piece was not in a cell. The last image was shows where it is. It's at the end of cell block, I can't remember what cell block, G or something like that. But all the rest of the windows in the exhibition, and there were 17 of them altogether, were in the cells. This particular window, I wasn't even going to make it because at the time it was the largest piece I've ever made. And I decided, the administrator of the historical site asked if I would consider making a piece for that particular space. And I said, oh, I can't do that, it will take years. And he said he thought it would be my masterpiece. And I thought, what do you know about what constitutes a masterpiece to me? And then I kept on thinking about it. And finally I was like, I have to do it. And I didn't want to blow up the figures and make them bigger. I just wanted to add more. And I wanted to make a scene where it was initially based on the idea of good versus evil. So I was going to do the 7 deadly sins having a fight with the 7 cardinal virtues. But I don't personally believe in straight on good versus evil binary thought like that. So I couldn't do it. And it just ended up being a giant prison riot, which is, I think, appropriate for the scene. And so that was some of what went into making that particular piece.
So at the end, for what are you saying, this piece at the beginning was scaring, but at the end you think is one, maybe, as you said, the masterpiece, one of the most important maybe things you do, because it was a challenge, because it requires to you a lot of work on maybe design or think about the composition, and I suppose a huge amount of glass, right, in this piece?
I'll tell you what, it's not up to me to say what my best pieces are. Ultimately, it is one of my favorites, and it was a huge challenge. I don't know if it used more glass though, because I make pieces over and I throw out so much glass trying to figure out what I'm doing, which is, it feels really wasteful and it's really expensive, but I just can't stand making something I know I can make better. In the case of this piece, I didn't edit. So I just started and I didn't have time. I had to do it and I make the whole thing and be done with it. So I might have used less glass. Who knows? Yes, and this piece, this was also in one of the cells at the penitentiary, and it was when the pieces unfortunately had to be taken out because it's a historical site. Nothing is allowed to stay in the penitentiary for very long. And I wanted to make the pieces have a border that, you know, harkened back to what the penitentiary looked like. In the case of this piece, I wanted to make the piece bigger. Most of them I just put a border on. This one I widened and gave her the rest of her arms. I actually have changed it because I felt like that right-hand arm was too long and thick. So it's different now. It's a little smaller. Anyway, it was one of my favorite pieces also that I ever made. And so it's, I gave it a better treatment.
I particularly also love this piece a lot. I think it's beautiful. the position of the body is so gestural and it's amazing. And you know what I wonder, all the little, like, not triangles, but the background, right? These pieces that we see with all the flowers and that, to do these pieces is all flash glass with different colors, like we were watching at the beginning for the technique, one on top of the other. Like for an instance, you have maybe blue, yellow, and red, 3 different all together.
Just blue and red. The yellow is silver stain, right?
Right.
Those are really fun. In English, the word for those diamond shapes is quarries, just in stained glass. In regular American English, we would call that a diamond shape. But in the field of stained glass, a diamond shape, which is very common in England, those are called quarries. They're really fun to make because all you need to have is a system. You need to decide how many points the star will have. So I was making 5 pointed stars. So you just take, in this case, I think there were like 100. So 100 red stars and 100 blue stars, and then I make them. And then I decide later how they go together because it's like playing with a kaleidoscope. There's no planning and anything, it's very spontaneous and it's really fun because I get to see things and go like, oh, wow, look at that.
You let yourself get surprised for the results in this
Yes.
process. Amazing. And this particular piece is inspired in a particular image, right? I think.
Well, I worked with the very famous image of the young child who is covered with napalm from the Vietnam War. I think that's a very brutal image, a very sad image, a very difficult image, an image of horrible suffering. And I think in some ways, I've done a lot of images that seem to me crucified women. I don't know what that's all about. All I can say is I observed that I have done it. And I'm interested in images of suffering. I think because I'm half Jewish and half Christian, it has always surprised me how the different cultures relate to my images. And I would say the Jewish tradition is iconoclastic. And I have been asked many times by my Jewish family, why do you make these pictures? Why, Judith? Why would anyone want to look at something like this? They never say it quite like that. Whereas people who come from a Catholic background have no trouble understanding. Sometimes I think they do not appreciate that I have deviated from the standard narrative. But my understanding is that images of saints and of Jesus are to help people understand their own suffering in a way that is helpful rather than just endlessly painful. I was raised an atheist. When an atheist experiences suffering, you just have to say, oh, well, life sucks. It helps to have a tradition where the suffering was meaningful or even beautiful. I do think that that can become perverted, but I also think that it can be helpful. So I think that some of my use of imagery like that comes from that place, even though I'm not Catholic at all. My mother was Episcopalian.
But I think it's very interesting what are you saying about how the sad images on these images with suffer or with pain that we can see in traditional Christian images or in another kind of image, like for example, as you were saying, your work that is so sensitive, or the other example we were watching before, your piece about this song you were mentioned, this melancholy or sad content that your characters or your compositions have, like how this, I mean, for you, for what you were saying, this sad part of the life, it's also kind of beautiful. Like you also have to recognize this, to see it, and it's something important. And as you were saying, that it helps to kind of fight with this reality of the world. And do you think that for you in this, let's say, composition or symbolic part of your work. The glass is also related as a material, how this material helps you to tell this or to compose these images?
Well, absolutely, because it has traditionally been used to show those images in Christian churches. I think the idea of making suffering beautiful is helpful because I grew up in a very lovely household and nothing was wrong with my life, but everyone suffers. When I was told, cheer up, you're not poor or whatever, it just made me feel guilty. Everyone feels sorrow, but you have to feel it to get rid of it and to experience it fully. So things being beautiful make it possible to interact with them longer rather than looking at a horrible image of suffering. I just want to turn the page. It's awful. I can't tolerate it. In terms of the glass itself, glass has been associated with ideas of enlightenment since the abbot Suger said that quote about Saint Denis, where stained glass is enlightenment embodied. But I think there's a lot of, it doesn't give enough credit to how stained glass can be also dark. If you want your house to be light, you're not going to fill it with stained glass windows. You're going to fill it with window glass like a reasonable person. The Protestants smashed all the stained glass out of the churches in England, partly so people had enough light to read their Bibles. But I do think that the beauty of transmitted light is something, the closest thing to it might be music. I think that it's so powerful, that it's so not intellectual. It's just, it just hits you, right in the heart, and everyone likes it. And people who say they don't like it are lying. they're lying. Everybody
I agree with you. I agree with you 100%.
They just want to seem sophisticated. But and I think that stained glass can be horrible because sometimes people just rely on the fact that it has that impact without manipulating it at all. So it can be very disappointing.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you for all your explanation. It's great. I love to see your point of view.
Oh, sure.
Maite, ¿sabes qué? Quería preguntarle si ella en este tiempo tiene una forma de trabajar que es muy marcada, uno reconoce su obra, su arte. ¿Cómo fue para ella insertarse en el arte con esta, por ahí, estigmatización de lo bello, ¿no? Con este mostrar diferente? ¿Cómo fue introducirse y si vio un proceso, un cambio en la mirada hacia su obra en todos estos años?
Perfecto.
I think I understood part of that question.
Oh.
I think part of it, the first part sounded like, how long does it take to make a piece?
It's about how long it takes, about what you were saying, that your composition now, I mean, we see your pieces and we know it's Judith for sure. So how was for you, how long it takes for you to your work as an artist can introduce in this art world? And if you think once you were, let's say more famous as an artist, as a stained glass maker, if the people have a different view of your pieces after this moment that everyone starts to say, oh, look, Judith, look this work, and you start to be in more exhibition, maybe in more museums. If you see that there was a change in this point, that you were more recognized and your work was more visible, and if the people stop maybe to think this you were mentioned about, oh, it's so sad, it's so horrible, this picture, and now it's another kind of things that, or how it was all this process, right? Since you start, you introduce your work on the art world, and how is for the people now, or how they live your artwork.
Well, the fastest answer is I have no sense of that at all. But I will say, I wanted to be a famous artist. That feels very separate to me than my desire to be a good artist. I wanted both. And I wanted to be a famous artist from the minute I began, as far as I can recall. And I also have enough of an ego that I kind of thought I was. So I was what you call in English a legend in my own mind. I do remember, I don't remember when, but there's this term, emerging artist. And a lot of times there are funding for emerging artists only, or an exhibition of recent emerging artists, things of that nature. And I remember at some point thinking, I'm not emerging anymore. I guess I've emerged. And it's just a very weird feeling. I don't relate to my work that way, and I think it's a little dangerous to do so. So for me, I try to keep it a studio practice more than a career business. Although I am ambitious, I'm still ambitious. I have to remind myself, oh, I've done what I wanted to do, so I don't have to worry. Because sometimes I think, things aren't going well. And I think, well, as long as I have enough money to survive and eat, they're going well. But I still have a lot of fear and anxiety around my career. And when at the beginning you read my credentials or qualifications, I always think, I'm so jealous of whoever she's talking about. Who's that person? And it's me. It's just weird.
I think it's amazing that you could do what you love, and you are doing an amazing work, and you continue doing it. And we are waiting for more Judith productions for sure, at least me, and to continue
I should say,
learning about you.
I love it, but I love it like someone has a marriage. I hate it. I fight with it. It's not peaceful. My studio is not a sanctuary. There's a lot of blood and gore. I think the creative process is really difficult, always, at every level. It never, ever gets easier. I have to remember to tell my students that.
I think that tension makes at the end amazing results, as we can see on your work. So don't worry, you are doing great.
Okay, thanks.
So tell us a little bit about this piece.
Well, the colored band at the top with all the birds, that was really an experiment. The bottom part, the girl, I think it's a girl, stuck inside the fur of a wolf being attacked by birds, was actually sort of brought on by feeling a lot of outside pressure and wanting to be protected. I think that the bird part must be what's going on in her head, as opposed to what's going on in the woods around her. So it was just inspired by that. Also, I wanted to make the trees sort of receding in space. And again, I was trying to make something that was sort of at least semi-convincing as a real space. So those are some of the things that went on there. This piece was sort of a quick piece where I wanted just to experiment with the black and white matte painting. You paint on the glass paint, and you can, when it dries, you can squirt it with some liquid and then brush it off, and it makes these crazy patterns. I grew up in a Catholic neighborhood, and I will say everyone in my neighborhood went to a school called Our Ladies. I think it was called Our Lady of the Sacred Heart, but we were all very young, right? And this was in Boston, Massachusetts, and the way it is pronounced in Boston, they don't have the R on our, so it was ladies, ladies. And I didn't know it was Our Ladies until many years later. I just thought there was a place called Ladies. And Our Lady, not ladies. Wow, it's interesting that these pieces are together. They're sort of related to each other actually, because I think the one on I'm very proud of them both. The one on the left was something that just sort of came to me in a spontaneously. I have all of these doodles, these little trashy drawings in Photoshop, and then I play with them to see what I want to do with them. And that's how I generated the image that became the birth of Eve. And also, I always draw these weird flowers, so I wanted to do a whole garden, which is also in the other piece, acedia. But very different ideas of how to make an image of a garden.
What I really love on the piece from the left, The Birth of Eve, is how it works, this black background, because you lost the lead lines, right? But for me, the first time I saw it was like, wow, how that piece can fit in the middle of a black glass. Like it kind of make a very interesting space feeling. And I think it's amazing, the contrast with all that darkness, and then Eve and all the garden down full of colors. And I can imagine here the garden, the process is something similar about you were mentioned before with the diamond things, about do different colors and figure it out how they work and go through the process, like kind of experimenting.
Well, yes. First of all, have you seen a picture of the piece, The Birth of Eve, so you know what the lead lines look like? I can send you a picture. It looks like a camera aperture. That was really hard for me to do nothing. It's harder for me to do nothing than it is for me to do all that stuff. Also, your technique has to be just flawless because everything shows up, and oh, that is nerve-wracking. So yes, she's supposed to look like she's like spontaneously generating into space. Yeah, and I remember after cutting all those pieces of glass out, my fingers were numb around here for forever.
Yeah, that's super. Yeah, wonderful. And about the other piece at Cedia, the process also, what calls my attention in this piece is the background on the woman, like this texture is from the glass, or is also something you create, as you were mentioned, on other piece like painting and then with maybe water?
It's in the glass. It's an American machine-made rolled textured glass called, I think it's called cat's paw. And I thought it looked like viruses. Maybe I should have made it sooner, closer to the pandemic. It's an interesting glass. I almost always work with transparent handmade glass, or sometimes window glass, like the gray sides are all window glass with a lot of paint on it. But in that case, I was using this piece of machine-made glass sort of to make it look diseased. This one was, this took a good chunk of my life. The drawing for this piece took months, let alone the glass. I was also determined to make the drawing repeat, like a fabric design repeats. So you can see that the bottom edges are also repeated on the top, and there is, I can't use my cursor to point, but the left snakes are on the right as well. So this was quite a technical challenge to me.
I think maybe I can do it. What snake? If you
Well, there's one lower with your cursor. All right, to the left, there's a pink snake head. Yes, that one. If you go all the way to the other side of the piece near the hands, other side, keep going. Oh, too far. There it is again. That's the same snake. So you can see that the pattern repeats.
This one and this one.
Yeah, they are different colors, but they are the same line drawing. And it's the same on top and bottom too. I got interested in exploring ideas that weren't just suffering women. And what I specifically wanted to do was bring more images of animals into my work. I think people are frequently upset by snakes. We had a snake growing up. It was not a scary snake. It was a very boring snake. It just sat in a tank and did nothing. And I think snakes are beautiful. And so I wanted to make a piece about the beauty of snakes, but also maybe the fear of snakes as well. So the person is pushing the curtain aside to reveal the true nature of life is a pit of the most beautiful snakes you ever saw, kind of thing. And yeah, the one on the left was also, in my mind, it was about climate change. Climate change is the political issue that I feel the most distress about. I mean, there's so much to be upset about, but climate change is a good one. And I wanted to make a piece about that. And I've made several. This is just one of them. Also, the entire piece is basically an engraving on blue glass that just has red glass behind it. So, and in the one new ghost on the right, that is an engraving on blue glass where the red glass is almost all gone and is making that lacy pattern. So technique-wise, they're very similar pieces.
So in New Ghost, you were saying that this kind of texture that we see on the background of the woman is red flash glass, and those little details is the color of the glass. So I can imagine that was a very delicate work, right? To do all these little red lines.
You know, the thing I like least in the creative process is starting a piece. So once I get my rhythm going, I want it to last as long as possible. So adding more details and using painstaking techniques is great because then I don't have to start another piece anytime soon. So yes, it is red glass. It was a pain in the neck to engrave it. It was sandblasted and engraved, and it was a ton of work, but I enjoyed every minute of it because I didn't have to think about what I was going to do. Very relaxing. You can get into a hypnagogic state of bliss when you're doing that. Like, la, 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 I'm just engraving all day.
Very practical and functional for you.
Yes, exactly.
Amazing.
By the way, that's the city of Berlin that she's hovering over, which makes me think about that movie by Wim Wenders, Wings of Desire. But actually, I was not thinking about that consciously at all. I used Berlin only because the JPEG was large enough, and I needed a reference for an aerial photograph of a city that had a lot of DPI, high res, even though it was a black and white image, so that I could transfer the image onto the glass, which I did not do with mechanical reproductive means. I did it by hand.
Oh wow! So you repeat for this part of the stained glass piece, for this piece on bottom that you are saying that is the picture of the Berlin, of the city. You reproduce this photo on the glass, and if maybe I'm wrong, but for what I see, it's a very dark blue glass, and then you work with some red glass also. Is two glasses?
always with blue and red, because then all you need to do is add yellow and you have the 3 primary colors. So you can also have orange and green and purple and white and yellow. So I almost always work with red and blue. Not always, but almost always.
But it's a lot of, it's more presence on your work is blue. And yeah, this piece I really found amazing that in this piece is just the shape of the woman, all the work with the volume and the lights is just one color and it's already amazing. So your work with the different layers is amazing, but just one color and it's great what you can do. I really love it. It's great.
Thank you. Thank you so much. The blue glass loves to be engraved. It says, engrave me, Judith. Engrave me some more. This piece is all paint.
But here, when you are painting, in these cases, you paint all the glass and you do a layer, right? Like traditional, we do a kind of homogeneous layer with this black painting, and then you take some painting with brushes, or you do it differently? How do you work with when it's just painting and it's not flash glass?
Well, it's a little different than a traditional matting tracing. This is all window glass, which I hate. I think it's ugly glass, but there's no point using pretty glass because you'll never see the beautiful qualities after I'm done with it. So what I do is, the first thing is I sandblast the silhouette of the figure so that it has a texture. And then I take a permanent marker and I draw the drawing on it. And then I rub glass paint into the sandblasted area and it makes a gray tone, and it only sticks where it's sandblasted because it only sticks to the texture part and it rubs right off of the slick part. And then I can still see the magic marker line. So I take a brush and I do a trace line. Then I fire it. So I do something like a matte and a trace first. Then I go into it after it's fired with the flexible shaft engraving tools and the files, and I bring out the highlights. Then I paint more and fire it again. And I go back and forth between painting and engraving until I'm satisfied. And in the case of these 4 figures, at the very end, I did a normal matte in the background. And of course, I wiped it off of the figure before I fired it because it gets everywhere. And then I sprayed it probably with glass cleaner. That's what I always used to make these mats, with glass cleaner instead of water. And Badger brushed it out and the bubbles came up.
Great. If I'm not wrong, if someone is interested, in your YouTube channel, you have a lot of videos, right? Where it's easy to see this kind of process you do.
Yes, and they might even be vaguely instructive. I'm not sure. I tried.
Amazing, even better.
Maite, ¿y cuántas horneadas puede llevar un trabajo así?
So Maria Eugenia is asking a kind of work like this, or in this process, normally how many fires you do, how many times the piece has to go to the kiln normally?
5 or 6, and anything after that is correcting stupid mistakes. So 10.
Wonderful.
Did you have a specific question about this piece?
Not as specific. You prefer to skip to the next one, maybe?
No, I'll just say, a lot of these pieces I do the figure separately. So the figure I finished and I liked the figure and I couldn't imagine what to do with her. So she sat in a box for like 3 or 4 years before I understood what image I wanted to make around her. And again, it's just another idea of how to make a garden.
I found this amazing. Like it looks so difficult how to do these backgrounds so detailed, but what we see here with the fishes and the birds or all the nature, as you said before, is always this technique about the blue glass engrave, and then the other colors we see is another glass, and all this process of engraving that you put one color is done, the other on top, and you construct the volumes and the new colors through this process, right?
That is exactly right. The difference between the area with the birds and the fishes is that in the area with the birds, I took most of the red off. There's only red on if the birds had a red design on their body. In the fishes, there's red everywhere. The only place there isn't red is where you see the color blue or green or white or yellow. So it's a little hard to explain, like I said, but I wasn't trying to figure, I kind of, know ahead of time, but I also don't. So it's it's almost like you just have to think backwards a little bit. Like if I want a blue sky, but I want the birds to be red, then I keep the red where the bird is and I take it off where the sky is. So there are a lot of images of a three-tiered cosmos, which is sort of based on the idea of an underworld, a heavenly world, and the actual world. I think at the Prado in Madrid, the piece by Hieronymus Bosch, the Garden of Earthly Delights, if you close the panels, there's an image of like a heavenly sphere that relates to that. The Prado is the most amazing museum. Wow.
We have now some little details of some pieces that I think is really interesting.
Well, this is a piece of pink on clear flash glass from Saint-Just. It's not Lambert's, which is what I usually use. And the top part is red on clear. There is some paint, some black paint defining a lot of the outlines and like the dark areas of her feet and her teeth. And a red on top that is her hair and the shadows.
Now that we were talking about, I continue passing some pictures about details or some other stained glass pieces you have that you select for us like important pieces, but something we think is really important to ask you, because you work a lot as a teacher also, you do a lot of courses and you work on school as a teacher also for stained glass, and how do you leave that part of this profession about being a teacher? And something that I found really interesting to ask you is what are you looking for to teach your students when you are teaching stained glass, or what do you expect from them? How is this part of stained glass for you?
Well, I think if one is a teacher, it's a good idea to have no expectations. First of all, I want to share my techniques because I don't want to die being the only one who knows how to do this. I think, does it sound terrible to say? I think it's a beautiful technique. I want other people to learn it and be able to do their own thing with it. So that's the thing I want to do the most, is impart techniques, but I also teach art classes that are not technical. And as an art teacher, I want the students to become an artist and to experience the wonderfulness of being an artist. I think it's very hard to figure out who one is as an artist, and I want to help with that. I only teach a few days a week. I'm not a full-time teacher, so I have time to do my own work, and it's very important for me not to have a social life. So that way I have enough time to make the work and to teach as well. I really like teaching. I didn't think that I would. I took my first teaching job for the money. but I fell in love with teaching. Students are wonderful. I like being with them. And I like seeing what they do with glass, because now that I'm old, it's hard for me to imagine new things to do with it, but they think of new things all the time. So it's exciting.
I don't think you're
Una
so
cosa
old.
que me parece importante de Judith es que también ella brinda mucha información en YouTube de manera gratuita. Eso yo quiero, bueno, agradecérselo, pero de parte de toda la comunidad del vidrio, que me parece un aporte que da ella muy importante para la educación.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, what Maria Eugenia was mentioning is, as I said about this technique you use, or this process about the painting, that you do it on a different way, that in your channel on YouTube, a lot of your videos, you can see that you explain. I mean, you are getting there when you have to explain something or show something. And for Maria Eugenia, what is she mentioning is she thinks it's a great way also to share and to let's say go to other people. For instance, for us that we're in other countries or maybe in other continents even, it's amazing to have this information that you give. And I found really important what are you saying about sharing and teaching people for the future, because not everyone does it in stained glass. For me, as someone young in this moment in Argentina, to start to learn these things or these techniques, or look for the places where you can learn and the teachers really show you everything and you have all the material for you, is not easy. So someone like you, that you just put in YouTube everything you do with details, and maybe a video is half an hour or an hour and it doesn't matter, it's a great material. And for Maria Eugenia, just give you a super big thank you, because it's something amazing. And I invite to everyone interested on Judith's work to look to the webpage and the videos, because really you learn a lot. And of course, go to courses. I'm looking forward to can go to some of your courses in some point. So I'm sure I will learn a lot.
Thank you very much, Maria Eugenia. I appreciate it. I will be teaching this summer with my partner, Glenn, at Pilchuck, if anyone's interested. I feel like I need to make a couple more videos. They're so hard to make, and I didn't want to make them. I only had to learn because of COVID. I had to teach remotely, and I had to learn how to tape myself. And the whole time I'm thinking like, oh, this is awful. I hate this. And how can I make this interesting? And will anyone be able to learn anything from this? And I'm teaching students who are not necessarily interested in studying with me, because they don't know who I am at the university, and they're just taking an elective course. So they're beginners, and I have to teach how to cut glass and everything. So it's a challenge, and it ultimately was fun to make them, but difficult.
I can imagine when you are used to do presence classes, it's very kind of another kind of communication with videos. So I think I understand what you mean. But actually it's great for us, for people that cannot go to the courses. It's something wonderful. So thank you.
I'm so happy about that. That's wonderful. That makes it worth it. I felt like I covered everything except the layering and stacking of glass. That's the one that I need to make. And I just got to the point where I stopped making them, and I was like, good, that's over. But maybe I will do that one at some point.
That will be amazing, for sure. So just something I want to ask you, for maybe someone that doesn't know so much your work. In the first picture that we see here is a meadow, right? I am pronouncing well.
Yes.
Here is also all black painting and silver stain, right? There's nothing else.
And this piece is leaded together. I got tired of people accusing me of not knowing how to lead. I know how to lead, so I leaded it. I've leaded a bunch of pieces recently. I actually really like lead. It's just hard to get what you need, because you have to buy so much at once. Who wants a whole room full of lead? And that's the piece that has the head that we talked about earlier. Now, she was originally going to have the background that was in a piece that you just showed a few minutes ago called Io, the Cow-Faced Maiden, which has, can you go back a couple of slides? That one. So she was going to have that bubble of, not this one, that one. She was going to have those birds above her head, but it didn't seem to fit with the piece. So if you go forward again to the one we're talking about, I then made these pictures of these drooping flowers, and she was also sort of drooping over the table. So I thought they would go together well. So that's how this came about. I have to say, I haven't been so excited about making something as I was these little vignettes. I could have made 1,000 more. It was very fun. And once I had, I don't know how to draw a glass vase. I looked at that and I felt like, I had fallen asleep and magic elves made it. It was a very amazing experience to me to see it emerge out of the glass. It did not feel like I was responsible. It was amazing, and I wanted to do it over and over and over again. It was really fun.
I found amazing the detail of the lights on these glass pots. It's just crazy.
I found it amazing too.
And how for the background is I can imagine is the blue and red glass together that they are very dark. Genau, exactly. Yeah.
They're pretty dark. They don't have to be that dark to make it dark. It's just once you get the red and the blue together, they're so dense, they make it almost black.
Yeah, there's actually a very, I saw once a glass that is a little layer of red and blue glass, and it looks like kind of black at the first time. It's like, what?
Exactly.
And then if you do something, it's like, no, wait, it's blue and red. Amazing.
Yeah, yes. This piece was based on an ancient Assyrian bas-relief that's at the British Museum. It depicts a lion hunt, and the lions look like they're in agony. It's just a really beautiful piece. It was also about my cat dying. And this was another piece about climate change and habitat collapse and what are we doing. Also a nod to Tiffany, because the piece of glass making the sky in the background, I have a friend in Philadelphia who makes stained glass windows, who has a large collection of old sheets of opalescent glass. And I wanted to find, just the right sheet like Tiffany did to make a sky. And it wasn't large enough. That thing that looks like a water spout is actually, I had to cut a piece off the top and put it on the bottom to make for that curtain. The curtain is there because that piece of glass was way too short for the whale. And I had to come up with something. So it also worked for me conceptually because it's like a game show where like the prize behind door number 3 is climate collapse. You win. That sort of thing. So anyway,
I love how the colors on the whale it's amazing.
That was done with acid etching cream in my bathtub. Yeah, I also wore a respirator for that.
So this piece has a lot of new challenge.
Yeah.
Changes on the design, new techniques. Yeah, why not?
Maite, pregúntale si a ella, con esto de las ventas de su obra, ¿hay alguna obra que le cueste vender o que elija esto no, esto me lo quedo para mí, no se va de mi casa, de mi taller, o si no tiene problema con desprenderse de las cosas?
Perfecto. So what Maria Eugenia was asking is, when you are producing your pieces, if some pieces, for instance, you say, oh, you know what, this piece, I actually would like to keep it. I don't want to sell it or to put it in, available for other person or for another place. I want to keep it myself. Or maybe some pieces or some kind of pieces are more difficult for you to introduce to the art market, or how is this process that you do with your work? Or if you don't have any problem at all and someone says, oh, I love that one, and it's like, yeah, okay, you can have it, why not? Like how it works for you.
I used to have a problem when I was younger. I didn't want to sell them. Now I desperately want to. The worst thing that could happen to an artist is that they die with a basement full of their own artwork. I want these things out in the world. I am not making them for me. And that's funny, you should ask that about the beached whale, because it's sold to the Des Moines Art Center, which I'm very, very, very happy about. But Des Moines is in Iowa, which is right in the middle of the United States, nowhere near an ocean. And there is a whaling museum in Massachusetts where I grew up. They actually asked later if it was for sale. And I was like, oh, I would have done anything to put that in a whaling museum. That's exactly where I want it. But it's in Des Moines, and that's good too. So I don't have control over them after they sell, but I do want them to sell. I don't want them in my storage. There are some that are harder to part with than others, but I have pictures so I can look at them. It's like, you know, children, you don't want your children to live with you forever. You want them to go out into the world and grow up. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think your pieces are done for being seen, so just sell all of them, please.
My pleasure. I would if I could. I thought this was the best human figure I ever drew at the time. I was very, very pleased with her.
She is beautiful. I have to, the expression and the anatomy, it's amazing. The movement of the hair, it's great.
Apropos of what Maria Eugenia said, I made the head twice, so I have a copy. I couldn't just, but part of that was not because I didn't want to sell it, but because I felt like maybe I didn't do a good enough job with this piece. I actually do think I did a good enough job with this piece, but I didn't think so. I thought I might want to do something else. So I felt like I needed an insurance policy.
Judith, is when you did this panel, you really like it, you were really pleased with it, so you did a reproduction of some areas of the panel or the panel itself?
Just the head, solo la cabeza.
So you keep that one, you have this head for you now? Just
the head, yes. But it was more because I was afraid that I hadn't done the best job I could. Now I am happy with this piece. It took me, I'm very happy with it, actually. I think it's one of my best ones.
This is amazing. All the details you do are amazing. I think you really love your job, and that's great.
Well, thank you. I love it so much that sometimes it drives me completely crazy. But basically, yes, I do love it very much. The piece on the left was about polluted water. Like there is a whole planet in every drop of water, so you don't want it to be dirty.
So you mentioned a lot about this climate change or nature thing. You really aware about the work that is going on right now, and do you think that now is a topic that maybe you use a lot on your actual work, or is something you always, and maybe in some moment spontaneously come some idea and you like to reflect this problematic with your pieces?
Well, when I was younger, Donald Trump was not president, so I didn't feel a need to be a political person. But with the election of Donald Trump, I felt like I had to say something and open my mouth. I also did a piece about Black Lives Matter, which felt like, who am I, a privileged white person to go there? But I wanted to say something about, you know, my hope for people getting along. And I was very moved by the fact that people were protesting during the pandemic because they were risking their lives for a point that they felt passionate about. And I was at home, so I wanted to contribute to that. There's a lot to be said these days, but I also think that any artist who is able to put forth their imagination is making a political statement, because in our capitalist society, I'll speak only for the United States, I think they don't really, they want you to be creative, but not too creative. They want you to be an individual, but not too individual. It starts to become a problem. This is also about climate change. Last belch of the fish. This is a stagnant pond seen from outer space, with a dying fish in it, but it's very hard to discern the fish. This must be one of the last images you have. This piece came about because I was taking a lot of walks during COVID and noticing a lot of people walking around with a little bag of dog waste. And it became a metaphor for how, aren't we all just walking around with a little bag of something that we can't seem to get rid of? So I wanted to make a picture of that. I also wanted to try again to make it a more realistic space.
With all the pandemic, how did you leave it there? You were able to work on your workshop without any problem, or you feel
it's in my house?
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, you feel like that maybe something changed. You have not so much work, or it was, in your case, was the same. How did you feel it?
Well, I would say in terms of selling artwork and the business of being an artist, first of all, it was terrible. Oh, this is the one that's about Black Lives Matter. It was a nightmare at first. For my exhibition, I had a retrospective organized about my work. And for 5 years, I was excited about this retrospective. And I didn't tell anyone because I didn't want to curse it with bad luck. And then it closed because of the pandemic. And it did open eventually, but of course, a lot of people didn't go. So that was horrible, horrible. I had a hard time working at first. So I just drew. I didn't make any stained glass for about 6 months. I think the pandemic was terrifying at first. Then it became boring, really boring, horribly inconvenient and boring. And that's sort of where I'm afraid that with this Omicron variant, that it will someday mutate so that the vaccines are ineffective, and then we'll be right back where we started from. And it's like, oh, I can't deal with this anymore. I'm not the most social person, but I don't like the rest of the world freaking out.
Yeah, it's
anyway,
a lot, right? And it never ends.
It's too much. And Raft of the Medusa was the piece I made about the Black Lives Matter protests. And this piece also endlessly repeats. So if you see oh God, it's hard to point it out, but like if you put your cursor on that hand, you're right near it. Not that hand, up and to the right. Yeah, that hand, the hand. You see that hand? All right, and then go all the way to the left. All the way there, that's the same hand. So in a Photoshop document, you could repeat this over and over and over again and make wallpaper out of it. But I wanted to show moments of tenderness as well as moments of struggle. And one of the reasons I designed the lead lines to be so weird is that I wanted people to be struggling with each other without realizing that there's a sort of superstructure overarching everything that we're really not paying attention to. and that there are greater forces at work than our inability to get along, basically. This piece is all paint and
exactly.
lead.
So in this case, you use also the lead to communicate, to give a kind of symbolic meaning to the piece.
Yes, to show that like we're shattered, and that the shattering is partly because human consciousnesses can't get it together to be together, and that's just nature or God or however you want to imagine it. So yes, they're not all tormenting each other, but they're also not all being nice to each other.
Complex relationship.
I tried to make characters of all races on the planet, so they're not just all Black people and white people. There's also Asian people, but it's hard to convey because ultimately we don't look that different from each other. So
no,
yes.
No.
And this one was I wanted to do a piece about habitat destruction of the Amazon forest and deforestation, and I needed to draw a single person with an axe, but I ended up drawing 7, so I wanted to put them all together in a composition, and tried to depict them not entirely as evil, but also as the result of a system that they've grown up in that has forced them into these roles of toxic masculinity and machismo that, you know, might end up in tearing down the Amazon. This is very tiny. It's also lost. I mailed it to the British Society of Master Glass Painters Centenary exhibition, and it got lost in the mail. So we don't know where this one is. It's only 1 square foot.
So we just have pictures from this piece. It's lost.
Maybe it will come back.
We never know.
We'll find out someday.
Maybe in 100 years, someone found it and it's like, wow, look at this glass, so cool.
I know. Well, I hope they don't throw it out. Yeah. I would like to have it back so I could send it back to where it belongs. But for now, it's lost. And this piece is also really small. Just the circle is maybe 10 inches.
Normally, your pieces are more, let's say, they are not big panels, right? It's more thinking, yeah, exactly. But I think that if you have to do is, as you said before, where we were talking about the penitentiary, that big panel with this technique, I can imagine all the hours and all the time that it takes. So I just think in your case, the size is, yeah, I think it works very good. It doesn't mean if it's small or big, all the little things you can see there, you can just spend hours looking at this and you will always find a little surprise.
I hope so.
Okay, so now I
sí, es la última.
finish, exactly, I finished to share screen. So now we can be a little closer for the last questions. I personally have to say, I admire your work since years, and I found amazing how you personally start on this glass world and you develop your own way to, your own language to could express what you want, and the strong your language as an artist in the aesthetic and artistic way has, I think, is something unique on your work, and that's why we choose you for these interviews we are making in 2022 for the International Year of Glass, and it's a pleasure for Maria Eugenia and for me to have you.
Yes.
And I think it's amazing that people like you with all this knowledge and these specific techniques can go to biggest institutions like Pilchak or other schools around the world to teach and to give us, the people that also get in love with glass, this knowledge. It's something amazing that not everybody does, and that's something remarkable and great.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you so much for your interest, and for anyone else who's watching. I really appreciate it. It's an honor and a pleasure. So thank you.
A mí me gustaría
And, you know,
una última pregunta, ¿qué es el vidrio para ella?
Sí.
¿Qué significa el vidrio en su vida? Y bueno, después terminás vos con la última pregunta.
La pregunta general, perfecto.
Sí.
So Maria Eugenia was saying the glass itself, what it means for you in your life. How can you describe what's glass for you?
No one has ever asked me that, Maria Eugenia. What a great
Really?
question. That's not in those words.
Maria Eugenia, sorry, I need to translate in Spanish because she will love it. Dice Judith que nadie le preguntó algo en esas palabras específicas hasta ahora, así que
Bueno.
respuesta exclusiva.
Bueno, acá vamos a saberlo.
Excellent. So, what's the answer?
I think that it has given me a sense of God. I don't use that word lightly because I still think I am an atheist, but it has taught me that a human consciousness can be connected to something greater. I'm going to start crying. It means everything.
That's all right. You are allowed.
I understand.
It's
so special.
Yeah, for me too. Thanks for asking that.
Wow, this is amazing. For me, it's also great because, as I said, I just admire you so much for your work, and to now, finally, after some years of studying and do a lot of things, I am working on a workshop, and I have an amazing boss that I love, Thomas. I work in a studio Medicus, and he's amazing.
Well, are you going to come to Pilchuck? You have to come to Pilchuck.
If I am waiting. I am waiting. If everything goes okay, that's the plan, because I'm looking so forward to be there. And my boss let me do also a lot of for my personal work, and I think it's just so amazing, as you were saying, that the human can just take this material and express something with glass. I mean, sounds so like, what are you talking about? And it's so beautiful. And the way you do it, it's amazing. And I think really what you do to share is something that doesn't have a price, because for people like me, I think that, or Maria Eugenia also, people that love the glass in different ways. Exactly. We just love to listen what everyone has to say to teach us and to grow and to.
When someone loves something, they usually want to share it, right? Because it's no fun to sit in your own stuff and not share it. It's like, look at that beautiful sunset. You don't want to sit there and like look at it yourself. It's, you know, it's much better with others.
Yeah, I think so. And that's amazing. And you know, something we always ask with Maria Eugenia to all the people we are interviewing in this special edition of interviews we are doing for 2022, because we think it's really important. And from someone like you, that you're a teacher and you're working since a long time and you continue working on stained glass and in a very beautiful and artistic way, is what do you think is going on right now? Like about what is the place of the stained glass right now in our society, in our world, and how can we communicate this language or this technique to the new generations in order to continue with people that wants to work with glass, to protect the traditional stained glass panels from years ago, and to continue doing what you do, that is discover, learn, and share, basically.
I think a few years ago, I would have said something about preserving stained glass in the university. First, I want to say about glass in general, it has issues with being having a high carbon footprint to blow glass. I hope that we find better ways to blow glass soon. Of course, stained glass requires glass, so there is that. You know, there's been a lot of discussion about how craft has been integrated into the fine arts, and I'm not convinced. I don't see a lot of respect for stained glass as an art medium. I think part of that is the fault of the practitioners of stained glass who refuse to be innovative, and I can understand why people don't consider it an art form. I can see why it's not glamorous compared to, say, digital art, although it's certainly glamorous compared to non-fungible tokens. I have no interest in that. But I would say what I touched on before, the fact that it's so seductive and beautiful and not intellectual is problematic for what we consider art in a contemporary sense. We talk about art like there's no hierarchies, but we still make fun of people who like kitsch. And I think the understanding of kitsch needs to be examined because I think it's racist, sexist, homophobic. And I think that when we disparage someone's experience with an art form that we don't like for whatever elitist reason we may have, we should examine it, including stained glass, which still moves many people today. Mostly it is in private homes and churches, so it's not accessible to a lot of people. And of course, I believe God died in like 1930. When did God die? Ideas of spirituality are hard to sell these days into a certain class of people. That doesn't mean they don't exist. It just means that it's difficult to make it sound like it's not mysticism or supernatural or stupid. I teach a course on creativity and inspiration, and talking about inspiration, I find no sources on it, no written scholarship on inspiration. Maybe Thomas Merton, but I haven't read him. I tried and failed. So I think that I don't think our medium will die because it's still persuasive to people and they still love it. But I also think that it's also dead because it had its day in 1400 and it's been kind of downhill ever since. So I think that right now, the best way to preserve stained glass is in workshops, like places like in the United States. I have no idea about other countries, although I did teach in Scotland and Canberra and Japan. So workshop situations don't have to defer a degree and justify their status as a liberal art. I think the liberal artification of art has been, it was like a beautiful balloon that went too high. And now we can't see the balloon anymore. But it was beautiful while it lasted. So I think all of art is going to have to find a way to exist in the underground, outside of the university. That's what seems to be happening in the United States. So I'm a little cynical, but hopeful at the same time.
Okay.
No, but I think it's really interesting to analyze and understand the need, I think, and as you were saying, not just glass, a lot of the art itself, how to make people understand that actually, I think like society is actually part of that work also. It's
Yes.
what, yeah, I mean, if we live in the society, we learn with the society, so the people that produce this glass that does or produce art, it's eating from society and this information all the time, and the result is the result from what they are living in this world that is all of us. So I think it's possible to find a way, but of course, as you said, it's difficult, and it's difficult to break maybe this kind of division between art, the piece of art, and a person, when actually it should be, I think, something emotional and something that someone can connect with it. But to break this kind of wall between is what we maybe have to work on it, these generations, to go and just communicate with the media and learn from people like you or other professionals and take all this amazing knowledge and go for it, for something new.
Yes, I love that idea.
Great, cool.
Thank you very much. You are a wonderful and powerful artist. Thank you very much for this meeting. We are connecting.
Yeah, we keep in touch for sure for maybe future activities. We never know. Or Bilchak, I'm looking forward.
Yes, I hope so.
I really want to meet you in person. It's a dream, so I hope it becomes true.
Well, I know I'm kind of inaccessible, but I appreciate your patience. And I'm so glad you invited me today. And thanks for everything. And so I guess that's it. I'm going to go eat lunch. You're going to go to dinner, right?
Yeah,
it's not dinner time in Spain. Dinner time in Spain is 10 p.m., right?
I am in Austria now, and it's 7, but yeah, people eat around this. It's kind of, yeah, everyone does his thing, but it's kind of dinner time. So yeah, but to finish this interview, I want to say, and also from Maria Eugenia, we are amazingly happy. It was an honor for us to talk to you. And really, we think this is an amazing material and an amazing way to start with this little way to share more and to open the knowledge of what glass means and what is glass about to people in Latin America, in Spain, and in all around the world. And we are just pleased with you and happy. And I hope we can have you maybe in the future for another thing. And thank you very much for everything, Judith. You are amazing.
And celebrate 2022, the International Year of Glass.
And muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias a ti.
Eso. Gracias a ti, Judith.
Nos vemos. Gracias. Chao.
Muchas gracias.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.